Hey everyone, welcome to Highly Unlikely with Josh and Jenaye. We're so glad that you're here and tuning in for another episode. Again, I'm going to make the joke again. It's Josh or Jenaye today. It's just me. He just popped in. He's about to go catch a flight. He has to be in Texas today. So it's frigid temps, so I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, that must be nice.
Bless his heart. He gets to go. But I have just the most fun guests and company, and I've been really excited for this conversation. And so we are joined today by Jake and Megan Thomas, which we'll kind of get into you guys' story, how we know each other, all that stuff. But I wanted to start with the question from the bowl, and then we'll kind of do the introductions and all the things. Sound good?
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Megan was nervous, but I said, this is not too hard. It's not a hard one. What is the best thing you've ever bought off Amazon? I'll buffer for you guys. It's my veggie cutter. Have you seen those things where it like dices it small and you just whap it?
Yep. Mine is similar and it's lame, but it's like these little suction cup hooks from my kitchen that I hang like the kids' washcloths on.
Oh my goodness.
So that's like not just laying there.
Wow.
And, yeah. So anyway, that's my lifesaver.
That would be a thing to utilize.
And they're cute. It's like gold, so it like matches my kitchen. It's not ugly. Yeah. So
each of your kids has a washcloth?
yeah. So like, mostly for Margot right now.
Your kids are probably way cleaner than mine.
Well, because like she's like at this stage where like she's just covered with whatever she's eating. So it's like you have to wash her off before she leaves.
I see those like reels. That's like when you're hanging out with another mom and you're just not the as organized mom, and it's like, yeah, kids, yes, wash your hands before you eat, like we do every day. Yes, us as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we just had a picture online of our living room with the kids watching TV, and it looked really clean. And somebody's like, how do you keep this so clean? And it's like, don't look at any place else in the house.
Don't look at the basement.
This part was clean.
Yeah. Right. I would say the thing, my best purchase, this is funny, is my wedding ring. Because
serious?
I spent all of the money on Megan's ring, and so then I got a super cheap wedding ring on Amazon.
It was like $20.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Hey.
So
Same one, you've not had to like replace it?
No.
Hey, how long have you guys been married?
5 years.
5 years.
That's amazing.
Yep.
If Josh was here, we'd probably go down the rabbit trail of talking about the debacle that was him choosing a wedding ring, because he really wanted one with like diamonds.
Yeah.
And it was our first fight, like engaged, where I once made him stand all the way across the like store. And I was like, no, it's shining like more than mine. No, you can't. No, you can't. But he chose a black one, and it's very nice. But sorry, I'm getting over a sickness. So
It's okay.
sounds like I picked up a hobby of smoking past week, but I did not. All right. So Jake and Megan, I've known Megan for, oh my goodness, it's been like 8 years now.
Yeah, probably.
At least
We
probably.
were just talking about that before.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I mean, just fun, like unique conference. We have been doing that for a while, but then just like, I feel like through that have just gotten to know each other through life. But I was thinking back, preparing for this episode, and I remember the meeting where you were like sharing, like we're sharing prayer requests, and you're like, if you just pray, like I'm going on this date with this guy, his name's Jake. We're just like, okay, we're praying. And that's just crazy to think from then to now. And I was just thinking, like, that's like a really fun part of getting to stay in a community for a long time.
Yeah,
It's like,
for sure.
you get to see the whole story unfold, which is really fun.
Yeah.
So yes. So Jake and Megan are just a sweet couple from the church, really involved in the life of the church, love Jesus so much. And we're going to get into where I believe their lives have definitely spoken how much they love Jesus. But maybe you guys, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, and we'll get into our conversation of why we're here.
Yeah. So we've been married for 5 years. Currently, I stay at home with our 2 kids. We have Margot, who will be 2 next month, and our foster son, who will be 5 next month. Their birthdays are very close. And we're just in the thick of kids right now, which is great.
Yeah.
It's a big blessing. So
Yeah.
And Jake, what do you do?
I am the HR manager for a corporation here in Bismarck called Frontier Precision. We sell geospatial technology, drones, precision ag technology, and I'm the head of the human resources department for the whole corporation. So we're all over the United States, but it's really cool to work for a company based in Bismarck.
That's awesome. Sounds like a sci-fi film, the company you work for, which is really
like
cool.
when people ask, I'm like, I don't know, they sell drones.
I would say if you want to know about the retirement, ask me. If you want anything about the products, not your guy.
Ask me. Yeah. I love that so much. Well, why we invited you guys on today is because we would love to just have a conversation primarily around foster care and your guys' journey around foster care. And probably we'll end up talking about the Lily Initiative in there too, just because that's so close to our hearts as well. So why don't we just start with, what did your journey to foster care even look like? I know some of the details. Maybe I'll just poke little questions in there, but in your guys' words, your guys' way, what was your journey to foster care?
Well, I think, like, to start off with, when Jake and I were dating, we had the conversation, which I think most people do, like, how many kids do you want? And like, whatever. We had talked about, like, adoption and what that looked like if we ever wanted to do that.
And we both felt pretty strongly that that was something that was going to be part of our lives, even before we had met each other.
Wow.
Which was really cool to, like, come to the realization that we both had kind of had that when we were visioning kind of what our future looked like before we even met each other. We both saw that, which was kind of cool.
You both came together and realized, we both have thought adoption was going to be a part of our future.
Before we even knew each other.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So we had that conversation, which I think is important to have. So we kind of got into it knowing that. And my plan was always, well, I'll have my kids. And then,
girl, boy.
When time allows.
I'm going to know. I'm going to choose. Yeah.
When time allows, we'll start either fostering or adopt or whatever the case is. So we got married in 2019, December, right before everything shut down. Praise the Lord.
Oh, goodness.
My mom wanted us to wait till March of 2020 to get married.
And you're like, Mom, just be grateful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I got married. And then I think it was like the end of 2020. We're like, let's start trying to have kids. And I was just like, I want to get pregnant right away. Like, there's no issue. There's no reason why I shouldn't. Right. Well, that did not happen. And like, this is just my story, so I'm just sharing it, I guess. But anyway, that caused me to, like, spiritually spiral when it did not happen the way I had planned it to happen. And I just became a very, I don't know, I think a different person. And you can speak to that too, like, because you were there witnessing it. But yeah, it was a very, very hard season. And I know you witnessed that too, of just like breakdowns all the time. Like we had
Sorry, it's not funny, but we always remember one specific example.
It was at the movies, and it was the movie Up. And there's that scene where, like,
in church at the movie series.
There's that scene at the beginning where they're in the doctor's office and you can tell it's like they're getting bad news. And I had like a mental breakdown throughout the whole service. I'm just like sitting there bawling.
And I'm just looking at her like, is everything okay? And I think I went to like reach out and she's just like, don't touch me. I was like, whoa, okay.
Anyway, we're fine now.
Well, but it's a real part of your story.
Yeah.
And in the moment, right? You're past it now. You're viewing that story in hindsight, right?
Yeah. So if you're going through that, it's totally normal. Like it sucks going through it, and yeah. So
how long was that season for you guys from starting?
So it was almost 2 years. It was like a year and a half to 2 years. Yeah. And I think just to like speak to that more, if somebody is listening and going through infertility, I wish I had gotten into like a support group. I know the church has one, so shout out to that.
Yeah.
I wish I had done that.
Meg, what stopped you?
I think it was just like this feeling of like, well, if I go to that, then I'm admitting for sure that I have a problem. And just
that's hard.
Yeah.
Well, that speaks to something that I think is interesting, is that a couple of things would be, we have very close friends that have dealt with infertility as well. And so it's good to speak to people that have already gone through it, because they can give you some insight, and, you guys know Ryan and Rachel Jungling. You've had them. They're one of our closest friends. Ryan and I have been best friends for a very long time. And I don't think
he recorded a podcast with us.
Yes.
Theirs about losing a child.
Yeah. And I don't think he would mind me sharing this, but I mean, his advice to me was just to really try and understand as much as I can what Megan is going through, because I don't, you just don't know that until you start really kind of understanding. but he would be very honest with you and honest to anybody that asks you or asks him that their walk through infertility was just as hard, if not harder, than losing a child.
Wow.
Which when he told me that was really eye-opening.
Right.
And it really kind of makes you take a step back and just say, like, we're dealing with something more than just like an inconvenience.
Yeah.
And so when you start looking at it, one of the things that I mentioned to Megan, because I've heard you say this to Jenaye a few times of like, it's just kind of our North Dakota way, right? Of just kind of trying to toughen up and get through it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one thing Megan and I talked about previously was you can't compare your infertility journey to somebody else's. You know, some people try for 5 years and they don't have any, you know, they don't see any end result there. But infertility, like clinically defined, is 12 months of trying and not, you know, getting pregnant.
Wow.
Which seems like forever, you know, like it seems like, an eternity.
But I would say, echoing kind of what Megan said, is don't try to feel like you're not worthy of kind of talking to somebody about that because you haven't tried long enough.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's kind
Like
of the
you've
feeling.
not earned your bag.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you've only been trying for a year.
Wow.
These people have been trying for 10.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it's hard no matter what.
Yeah, and when you
Right.
start looking at like when I started, I remember Megan really appreciated this. When I said I found this out, even though it was like hard, is that, you know, a lot of the research would say for women especially that walking through or getting kind of that diagnosis of infertility was about the same emotionally, like in their, like processing it emotionally or in their brain as getting like a terminal cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was important to understand that, like I said earlier, we're not just dealing with something that is like oh, well, you know, we'll see how it goes, you know, I'm sure it'll get better. It's like, this is something that is really, you know, it hits you in a different kind of way than maybe something else that you're dealing with in your marriage or just even in just your life in general.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
so we walked through that, and I had support from friends and family and stuff, but it's not, I think it can be very lonely because friends don't want to always be like, how are you doing? You know, like you don't want to bring stuff up if it's going to make them sad, you know? And then you feel like a bad friend because it's like people are getting pregnant or talking about their kids. And I would just go home and cry because I'm like, I just want to be there.
Yeah.
I just want to have that, you know? And then you feel guilty and bad. And it's like, okay, all of this is totally valid. And it's okay to be happy for somebody and feel sad for yourself at the same time, you know?
Right.
So, and that was just a lot of like figuring that out too.
Yeah. And I think too, I can't remember. I just saw it the other day. It was in one of the Psalms. I can't remember what number it is, but it says, the Psalm starts by saying, God, just hear my sighing. And I thought, that is a good summation of what it's like to go through this because
Right.
it's very emotional, I think, at first. And after a while, like, I guess maybe from my perspective, it's just kind of like, you're just over it. You're just done, you know? And it's just like another month of now disappointment. And then we got in, you know, I'm sure you can talk about, and we went through all different stages of trying to get, you know, help with conceiving. And it's just like, good grief. Like, how much more of this are we going to go through?
Yeah.
And
You see where it really gets into marriages. I remember like a friend explaining that. I was like, I just never understood what a toll it would take on your marriage.
Yeah.
And what
Because
your
I mean,
marriage walks
it's
through.
true. Like it becomes a chore. Like it really does. Like, you know, it's like, we gotta try, you know? So, and like, I'm so glad we had the conversation that we had while we were dating. Cause we had both felt like I felt like I just like, I don't want to go anywhere near like IVF personally. It's not a moral conviction or anything. I'm just like, I don't want to put my body through that. Which I'm glad we had that conversation because like he said, we started doing some treatments and stuff. And I'd give myself shots to try ovulate and nothing's working. We did the IUI. And I think through all of that too, people are like, oh, I know somebody that did that and then they got pregnant. Oh, I know somebody that did that. And then and that like isn't helpful. Like it's
I was
not.
going to say, yeah. Maybe a little tip.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then like we did all these things and they were pretty much like, well, the next step would be probably going through IVF.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was so desperate. I think I would have started exploring that. But Jake was there to like reel me back and be like, remember, like, we don't want to do
we talked
this.
about this.
Yeah.
You have to know where your boundary is.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I think that's really important because, you know, not that this is anywhere near IVF. I'm not equating it at all. But I was just sharing with Megan the other day, you know, you look at even in biblical ancient times, you have all of these, we know are false gods, but like all these fertility gods.
Yeah.
I mean, all over the place.
Yeah.
And that led people to do some of the most heinous, sinful things with the promise of conceiving. And it's like...
And even the pressure then of like what your life was tied to.
Yeah.
And then like,
Yeah. So it's like, it's really important because I feel like if you don't kind of set some of those guardrails, you're going to feel really lost because the desire is going to be there to keep chasing it. And I don't fault anybody for doing IVF, so I don't want it to come across like that. But for us, we just knew that, I think honestly, like after our first IUI appointment and like seeing kind of what all goes through with that, you almost kind of get the feeling of like, do we even want to get pregnant this way? Because it didn't feel right. And it was really uncomfortable. And it really is just like, what are we doing? Right. You know, you kind of have that realization of like, okay. I think we both kind of realized it at the same time. I mean, the shots, the pills, the appointments and everything. And it was just kind of like, I think we're done.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was some advice that we had gotten from our friends is like, just take breaks. Like, take breaks, like mental breaks. And so we did. We're like, okay, we're just gonna take a break from everything.
Yeah. Not obsessing over it and having to stay on top of it all.
Yeah.
I'll never forget when we started exploring adoption. My one friend who had adopted 3 kids, it was opened, semi-open and closed were the 3 situations she had. And she had gone through, I think, multiple rounds of IVF. None were successful. And she just was broken down one day, just crying. And her dad said, Jess, what do you want? And she said, I want to be a mom. And he goes, then go be a mom. Like, there's so many kids who need a mom. You did not say you wanted to be pregnant. And it was this moment for her of like, oh, this isn't the only way I can be a mom. I want to be a mom.
Right.
It's not that I want to be pregnant, which is story was like just such a powerful story for me in our journey as well.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you kind of were reaching that point as well.
Yeah. And I think like, and we, in the course of all this, we had even talked to adoption agencies. And like, after we got off the phone call, like I just knew in my gut, I was like, this is not, this process, this adoption process through that agency is not for us.
Yeah.
Like
we went to one agency and I vividly remember because we were like, okay, this is our next step.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be okay.
Again, I was like, oh, this is going to work. We're going to get a baby in like 6 months.
And we sat in this lady's office and it was really great. And it was a Christian organization and it was private adoption. And we were all excited about it. And then she told us to conservatively budget $50,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but that wasn't that like the one that we met with too, though. Like,
then they didn't have any.
They didn't even. They were not even taking names for the waiting list.
Yeah,
because there was like such a waiting list. Yeah. So we're like, all right, this door is clearly shut.
Yep. So another, another sigh, another like, oh geez, now
so you
what?
had looked through this process into adoption.
Yeah.
So at what point did it turn to like, foster care?
Because Evangel is such a, support system, the Lily Initiative for fostering, like we had talked about it. And like rightfully so, Jake's concern was we're going to get a kid and you're going to, like, I will get so attached. Like what will happen? Because the thing is reunification. Like that's the main push.
Yeah, you can't get into it for adoption.
Yeah.
And
that was the advice we received as well.
Yeah. And he's like, what's going to happen when we, this child has to go back? And like that was a valid, concern. And so I like remember very vividly. It was during it was during church service, and I was having this internal dialogue with God of like, should we do fostering? What should I do? And like I just felt like, and I just said like to God, I was like, what happens when this kid has to go back? It's gonna hurt so bad. And he was just like, would it hurt any more than if you already had a child at home? And I was like, no, because I'm gonna get attached no matter what. Like that's just me. I'm gonna get attached no matter what. And so like I just felt like very convinced at that point. Like God was like, go forward with fostering.
Yeah.
And then I was sitting there like, I did not hear that from God. Like that was just me That was just me telling myself that.
Trying to kind of put a doubt on it. Hedge your bet a little bit.
And then Pastor Josh's message was hearing from God. I don't know if you hear from God.
And there are no coincidences.
Yes. And the whole time, like, this is a coincidence. This is so crazy. And his last little blurb of his sermon was like, are there coincidences? Sure. But God's in those too. And I'm just like, all right.
Never mind.
I guess we're going to start fostering. So anyway, so we got in the car. I was like, all right, we're going to go forward with fostering. And, you know, we started the process. And that was like in May of 2022, April or May of 2022. And so we went with Nexus Path. And so we met with them and just kind of, got some information and decided to go forward with that. And then about a month in, like June, I think, I found out I was pregnant. So it's just
a month into fostering or a month into the process?
A month into the process.
Okay, yes. Okay, I'm recalling this right now.
Yep. So about a month into the process, I found out I was pregnant, which was just like totally unexpected.
Which you guys had really just released that.
Yeah,
and it
I was just like
we're not
gonna
fixating
happen.
on this.
Yeah. Like we weren't actively like trying, you know, like we weren't, wasn't tracking anything, nothing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the
just like,
doctor had told us, you know, if you don't go forward anymore, like with IVF, you know, you kind of run out of your options.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is, I mean, that was something that we had to just come to terms with. And we finally had.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, you know, then we took the step into fostering. And then, I mean, it's a day. I know both of us will never forget, you know, Megan anxiously waiting for me to get home. And I was later than usual.
Yeah,
and
it's a Bible study, just yapping away.
And she's like, are you coming home? I was like, yeah, I am. I'm just talking, you know, and she's sitting patiently waiting to tell me this. So,
So that was obviously very exciting.
Yes.
So then, of course, the foster agency was like, are you still going to move forward with fostering? I'm like, yeah. I was like, we feel very like convinced, like this is what we're supposed to do.
I think that's the one part of your guys' story that I wanted to delve into a little, because I think a lot of people could be like, oh, I got what I've been praying for so long. This must mean God didn't speak to me. But what I mean, you encouraged me in my faith where I was like, oh, like when God speaks, am I going to listen? Even if I get what I was asking for 3-5 years ago.
Yeah.
We never wanted it to be where it's like, well, this was just our plan B. This was just our backup, you know? And so I will say, honestly, I think some of our family and friends, as much as they love and support us, were concerned of like, are you guys seriously going to now look into getting 2, 3, 4? I mean, sometimes you can get a whole family that you have to foster.
Exactly.
And we've never had kids. And now we're dealing with, you know, looking at this. And it's just like, we were pretty adamant that just like, you know what? We feel like we can do it. And we're just going to kind of put ourselves out there. And it's, it was a challenge going from no kids to 2.
What ended up
so
happening,
you guys got approved and then you got your foster son.
At the end of January.
Okay.
1 month before Margot was born.
Yes. Okay.
Because then she was born at the end of February.
And he was he 2?
2 just about to turn 3.
Yeah.
Okay, when you guys had him in your home. And how many homes had he been to before?
I think we were like his 9th or 10th home.
Yeah.
9th or 10th home within like under 3 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
And now he's been with you since he was 3.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's about to turn 5, did you say?
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is amazing.
Yeah. So the family that had him before us did a lot of, you know, work with him of just like
Great.
Wonderful people.
Yeah, very wonderful people. And just like forming that stability for him too.
That's great.
But of course it was hard. Like, you know, like you think of his 2-year-old little brain, like he can't compute, why am I going from this house where he had a little girl that was about his age. So they were like brother and sister to now I'm over here with these people. I don't know them, you know, like, so you think of that trauma too, which always like breaks my heart to think about like how scared he must have been.
Yes.
But, and I think in that situation too, our family and friends probably were like, you're going to take this toddler that has, you know, probably some trauma issues just from moving around that much, and then have a baby a month later. Like, what are you doing? But I was just like, God told me to do this.
Yes.
He knows what he's doing.
Right.
I obviously don't, because none of this was my plan. My plan didn't work.
Yeah. We're done
I
trying
tried
to kind
to
of control
control it,
this situation.
and I clearly cannot control it. So, yeah.
So you have Margot, and so you have a newborn and a 3-year-old.
Yes.
How was that?
Which I will tell you. So this
Still
shows
lots
you,
of tears.
this shows you how new we were to the process. We had to do a kind of a trial run with our current foster son before we kind of committed to taking him full time. So it was a whole week, I think.
Yeah.
And he was in daycare at the time. And Megan and I bundled him up and got, in the car and drove him to daycare and went to the wrong door, dropped him off at the wrong room.
Yeah.
And we're just like, oh my gosh,
Like
this is a great
he's
start.
freaking out. I'm like crying.
Yeah.
It was terrible. But we figured it out. We
got it
got
together.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what was hard is like, not even just like postpartum, but after you have a baby, there's just like hormones like crazy,
Yes.
So it's like I have that going on, and Margot was the easiest baby. Like seriously, God knew like we needed an easy baby, and she was.
that.
But I mean, so he was in daycare for maybe a month after I had Margot, and then he was home with us. So that was just a big change too for me, and especially, and like this is going down totally another rabbit trail, but like. My self-worth had always been in like work. I was a dental assistant before I stayed home. So like that was where like I brought home money. That's why I contributed. And now I'm like, I don't do anything. And
Groundhog's Day. I was saying, my season at home, it was like, how do I find worth in that I'm doing this?
I'm just going to clean the kitchen for the 10th time today. But that's, I would not change it for the world now, but that was a really hard adjustment all in itself. Plus adding in a 3-year-old that you haven't built up to that 3 years with, I think that's what's so different. You don't know their quirks yet. You don't know what's going to set them off.
You're learning 2 children at the same time. You're learning Margot's cues and then his cues as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And once you get into fostering, you start to realize, and you hear from people that have been doing it a long time, that there really is a honeymoon phase. And so when our foster son came to live with us right away, it was like, wow, we have hit the jackpot.
This is great.
This kid is obedient. He is so nice and well-behaved and doesn't cause any issues, has no tantrums. He stays in his bed.
Looking back, it was probably once again, because he was probably scared.
He's terrified.
Yeah.
I did hear like a child counselor or therapist once say like the kids who don't ever talk back, don't ever, like they fall in line every time. Those are the kids you should be the most worried about, even if it's your own kid. Yeah. Like they're suppressing something for some reason.
So his little mind is just trying to protect him for the 10th time.
Exactly.
And as he became more comfortable with us, and shout out to our friends and our family who immediately just treated him like any other member of our family.
Yeah.
And that was from day one. And so
That's awesome.
that was phenomenal. And as he got more comfortable, then he felt more comfortable to speak his mind, express his emotions.
His emotions are safe to come out too.
And that's okay too, because we wouldn't change that for the world. But it gives you really insight into just it's lots of learning of what kids are going through, and we've always said too, we've been very adamant that, especially as Christians, that, we don't know all the details of why our foster son was placed into foster care, and we just want to make sure that, any part of our journey with him that's continuing on, if in the whole that's looking like that's going to be adoption, but there's going to become a time where we're going to have to talk about, his biological family and why he's not a part of that family. And we've just been really adamant that part of that journey is just going to make sure that there's no judgment at all on families that have had to give up their children, because as much as we love and adore our foster son and how much he's blessed us, it shouldn't be that way. He should be.
It's an immense cost. That's
and it's not. That's not how his life should have gone. And it. You sometimes have to kind of make sure you don't get this complex of like just out here to rescue all the children. Because
we call it the savior complex.
Exactly.
You got to deal with that if you got to
be
foster
really careful
adoption.
because you don't want to come across that way. And you have to remember that, really if our goal should be that there are no kids ever placed in foster care. Not that there aren't, it's one thing to say we don't want any kid in foster care because that we have all these foster families.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. But the goal should be that no kid ever has to get placed into foster care.
We have actual healthy family units.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Taking care of the kids.
And so, it's one thing to, feel like we're going to make a difference, we're going to be serving, but you have to recognize the limitations on that too.
Yeah.
That's- If not, I think it can turn into be, something kind of unhealthy.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I think too, even you just saying that, like when we said like, oh, we're getting this little boy, like so many people are like, oh my gosh, you're going to be such a blessing to him. Like he's so lucky to have you guys as parents. And I was like, no. We are lucky to have him.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I always wanted, like I've always wanted kids, and
Right.
he is my child.
Yes.
Like Jake
Yeah.
asked me like, I don't know, a couple months into having 2 children. He's like, do you feel any different about them? I'm like, I would die for either one of them. Like they're both my kids,
right.
Like
Yeah.
they're both my children.
Yeah.
So,
And even now, I mean, you guys are in a long waiting process there to get, told you I'd hit the mic. I just did. To get to the point of adoption. And I don't know what you're allowed to go into, what you're allowed to say, but I think for some people, just even helping them to understand the process, to understand maybe what
Yeah.
you have to wait on, what.
I think and we've only ever had our one son. Like it
Yes.
just happened that way.
Your story is very rare.
Yeah.
I feel
And,
like
like-
even
Yeah.
not a lot of people, if they say don't get into foster care for adopting.
Yeah.
And then it's like, and
And
isn't
the
it
first
interesting,
one, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. And it's not that they've called us with others and we've said no, but it's just like, this is the only call we've gotten really.
Yeah.
And like we've told them we're open to others. But anyway, it really comes down to like, they have to terminate parental rights, which for that, every case is different too. Like, it depends. Is there any drug or alcohol use going on? Are mom and dad stable, or, one of them stable?
Did you guys have to facilitate family visits at all within your foster journey?
No, there's only one visit. His grandma wanted just to see him to make sure he was okay, make sure he's doing all right. So we went to her house, and that was the only visit, And I just explained to him, like, this is just another grandma. I'm like, just like your, like, because he's met my, my great grandma or his great grandma. So I'm like, just another grandma we're going to go meet. So that's been the only contact he's had.
Yeah. So the first step on the adoption, if your foster case turns into an adoption case, would be, like Megan said, the terminating the parental rights, which is something very serious. I mean, that is a huge decision by a court to do that. And it's not one that's taken lightly. And so I know that, sometimes there can be some frustration with, people, especially on the outside, that are like, well, why are they still giving that person a chance? Why haven't they just cut ties completely with the biological mom or the dad because, of their drug abuse or their mental health issues or whatever's going on? But it's because you're asking the court to take away this person's right to their child.
Yeah.
And so we should want that to take some time. I mean, that is not a decision that should be made lightly by anybody. And so that's kind of the first step. And then once that happens, then you kind of have a path that you go on of like, okay, we're in the adoption placement process. And sometimes it's the foster family that is the adoption placement, and sometimes it's not. Maybe that family is just not open to adoption. They're just in it for kind of a transitionary period.
Right.
And so then the search might come out to be like, okay, now we have to find an adoptive placement. Sometimes it's the same. So for us, it's the same. Like we are willing to continue on as the adoptive parents.
I will say for us, and I don't know if it's like this for all families, our foster son is Native American. So then they do a pretty widespread family search, which I'm not sure if they do,
think
if they're
so.
not.
In other
Yeah.
scenarios, yeah.
But so I know they did that a few times and nobody stepped forward. So for us, then it moves forward into the tribal council, which is where we're kind of in limbo right now.
You're just waiting for two key appointments or something, two key court dates maybe.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's just so we have their blessing. That's part of their process. It's just to make sure they've met the family that's going to be, adopting this child. So they want to make sure that we have the recommendation of our caseworker that's as part of that tribe, that we're going to honor our foster son's heritage and culture, and that we respect that. And so it's an important process. It's just a long wait sometimes. And if we were not a part of, if our case was not involved with our son who's an enrolled member of the tribe, then it would still go through multiple phases. So it's not like it's a quick, turnaround, but there might be a little, some just different steps, but eventually you get down the road of, you're able to get a court date established for the adoption. So I guess our prayer is that happens this year, and we're hopeful, but it is what it is. So yeah.
I was just thinking, I just saw 2 other ladies that are on our unique team with us, and them as well in the past year. Solidified adoption, same process, same with their kiddos.
And they've been I know who you're talking about. They've been such a support too, and I think that's where Lily Initiative.
Okay, I had a question of that, of how has the Lily Initiative impacted your family while you've been fostering? And for those that don't know, the Lily Initiative is our initiative here at Evangel that solely exists to support fostering and adoptive families.
I mean, that's been huge, having these sounding boards, not only as a new mom, but the fostering process. I know one of the gals has adopted 8 kids, 7 kids, a lot.
It's a lot.
So they know what it's like to go through that process.
So she knows, and just having, and even other people that I've met with, just their process and how long it took for them and all that kind of stuff. What's normal, what's not normal. When to push, when to just not push and just chill for a while. And I think even just taking that step was made a lot easier, knowing that support was there. Just knowing they have the grandparents team and the babysitters team and all that kind of stuff. And even financial reimbursements, that's all, it just made that step just that much easier, knowing there's people to kind of fall back on if needed, and that you're not just on an island by yourself, but there's this community that helps. And even outside of that, this last April, I had to have my gallbladder out, which was found out that day. They're like, oh, you should just go to the ER and get that out. I'm like, okay. So
no problem.
Yeah.
Just let me cancel all my daily responsibilities.
No big deal. So I texted Annika. I'm like, I need food at my house because I'm like, my mom's going to come watch the kids. I never have food. I never have, I'm just not, I don't like to cook, whatever. She's like, no problem. Got it. She's like, there'll be a Costco order at your house, by 5. And I'm like,
there was almost too much. You didn't have enough space in the fridge.
That is good. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
It was great. So, just even that was amazing. And one day I was sick and somebody brought us pizza and so it's just that kind of stuff. It's just huge. So.
Wow. That's awesome. What's been your biggest challenge throughout your fostering journey?
That's a good question.
I think it is, you have to learn to be patient with the process. And sometimes it's just pulling teeth to see some progress, whether that's with reunification or that's towards adoption or whatever, but it really focuses you on just trying to take a step back and just take it as it comes, and you have to just be prepared to kind of battle through the inconsistencies, the delays, whatever, because that's just how it is. I mean, these are people's lives, and there's only so many people to go around that can service kids and stuff. I would say the second thing would just be, and this is probably the part that's hardest that people usually bring up, when I mention it to people that we are foster parents, is just kind of that risk of vulnerability of being well, I just don't know if I could, take a child in and get attached to them and then have them move on. And I think that is a very legitimate concern to have and to think about. But I would just really challenge people on that what it means, especially if you're a Christian, what it means to have a heart is to be vulnerable. And I remember there was a told you I'd do some name dropping.
Of course.
There's a quote by C.S. Lewis that says, to love is to be vulnerable. And to love at all is to risk getting your heart broken. And he says, but you don't have to do that. So if you'd rather have your heart remain intact, you can keep it safe. You can close it off.
Yeah.
And you can fill it, he says, with just the modern luxuries of the world.
Wow. Yeah.
But if you do that and you keep it safe, it's going to change. And your heart's going to become impenetrable, and it's going to be, you're going to have less access, because to love is to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think especially as Christians, you know, we have to remember that we are called to go into the spaces that are hard and that are emotional, because we know that we are equipped to do that.
Yeah.
And even when it feels uncomfortable and even when it feels scary, you have to be the one that steps out in confidence and just say, even though this is going to be hard for me, this is what needs to happen for this child, you know?
Well, and the gospel is not a gospel of self-preservation, and everything about that is self-preserving, right? What if I get her? What if I get too attached?
Yeah.
I think Angie has a shirt that's like a fostering shirt that says "Get attached."
Yeah.
Because it's like, that's what they need.
That's
like,
what these
actually,
kids
that's
need.
what that kid needs.
Yeah.
And if your heart's a little broken, it might spare their heart from being even more broken.
Yeah. And you have to think too, like, what long term, you know, what will your love do for that child?
Yes.
You know, even if they end
What
up going
seeds are
back to a
planted.
situation that maybe isn't the best.
Yeah.
They were with you for a while and they felt that love.
Yeah.
And you were a light for them for that long.
Yep.
So it's like, who are we to say that we can't make a difference, even if it is for a short time?
So here's a follow-up question to that. So is foster care for everybody?
Probably not. I mean, I just I don't know.
I think it depends on how far you are willing to go.
Yeah.
And how willing you are to get risky with your vulnerability.
Yeah.
And some people, they're just never going to get to that point where they're comfortable doing that. And I don't begrudge them at all, because it's a lot to ask.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean,
and just like, not everybody wants to be, and I don't know if there's a better word, but like inconvenienced, you know, like our son had a lot of appointments when we first, you know, got him. And like, if I wasn't a stay-at-home mom, that would have been a huge inconvenience of you know, OT, PT, and then we ended up doing some other therapy.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just like a lot of running, and some people, it's not for them. And if that's not for you, then you shouldn't do it, you know, especially if it's gonna, I don't know, build up bitterness or something, right? Like, then
That's also what I've loved about the Lily Initiative is it's given, I think, some people, like I think people on the grandparenting team or babysitting team, where maybe they're not in a space where like my life is not conducive to maybe even the consistency that I would need to bring a child into my home. But I can be on this team and I can go make an impact in their life, or I can make sure I'm a part of the support team so foster families can stay in for the long term with that too. So I think too, like for people, don't discount it completely.
Yeah.
Just because you maybe are like, well, I can't do what Jake and Megan did. Well, could you?
Yeah.
Make a meal, deliver a meal.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing to remember too is that, you know, if you want to get involved in fostering, you don't have to take long-term placements.
No.
Yes.
You are in control. So if an agency calls you and says, hey, we have a family of 5 and you just don't feel like that's going to work right now, then you can kindly pass and you'll get called again. And sometimes maybe it's just starting with, we're going to provide foster care for a weekend for another foster family.
Which can be referred to as respite.
Exactly. And that's a great way to get started, because you know it's temporary.
Yeah.
And it just it's a huge service to people who maybe don't have family close by, or, you know, and so that's a good way to get started.
Because sometimes I've heard stories, even if like a foster family wants to go on a trip, there might be things with state lines or things where they can't bring their foster son or daughter with. And so
I always think that's kind of comical, because like we have to technically get authorization to travel across state lines, because if we were just randomly pulled over or something and the kids start saying like, this isn't my mom and dad, and you know, it's like you want like some sort of paperwork saying I didn't steal this child, you know?
But what peace of mind if you had to leave, you know, your foster son or daughter, that there's a loving family that you know, of believers that would take them in.
Yeah, for sure. So and we've done respite for a kiddo once, and great.
That's fine.
He just came and hung out with our kiddo and
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What do you wish people knew? And maybe we've covered this, but what do you wish people knew about foster care, or maybe even more specifically about your son without getting too specific?
I would say that and Megan's already alluded to this, is that, I mean, I feel very proud of the service, that we're able to offer our son. But the privilege is ours to be able to have him bless our life, whatever amount of time that looks like. And it looks like it'll be a permanent thing. But even if it wasn't, the privilege has been ours to be able to serve him. And I think that you would be very surprised if you're kind of on the fence of doing fostering, how much fulfillment you will get, even in the struggles, or even when it's scary or sad. I was just listening to a podcast the other day from Tim Keller, who I know you and I have talked about a little before. And he had his whole message was on praying your tears. And he said you get to do 3 things with your tears. You can expect them as Christians, because when your heart's been touched by God and restored by God, it becomes more of a heart. And so you're going to actually be crying and weeping more as a Christian than if you weren't. So expect them, expect the challenges, expect the scary, expect the crying. But then, and this fits into what we've been talking about here at Evangel for a while, is he says, the second step is to sow those tears. And it's in one of the Psalms that says, the man who sows in tears, reaps harvests of joy. And sometimes that could take a month to come, or it could take decades.
Right.
But if you can find a way to plant your tears in a way that's going to be honorable to God,
right,
there will be something that comes out of that. And we don't know when, but something will come out of that is a huge source of joy for you. And that's, I think about our walking through infertility and the scariness of kind of jumping into fostering and the uncertainty and the frustrations and all of the tears and sighing, that we've been through. And it's like, we've already seen the harvest of our joy, just the amount of love, I mean, like we said, we never had kids before we got our placement. I mean, Margot wasn't even born yet. And I'm sure Megan remembers this too, but like I vividly remember picking up our foster son from daycare. And I remember the very first time he said, my dad is here.
Oh,
yeah.
Like that.
I can't.
Yeah.
You remember that.
Yeah.
And that sticks with you. And that's like, you start to see some of those things that you've planted, and that's part of that harvest,
You got me, Jake. I can't recover.
And that is like, if that's even just for 3 months or 6 months, that child has stability and that he has love, that is the main thing. And you really need to step outside of yourself and just say, like we said earlier, like, this is not about me. It's not about my comforts.
Right.
It's not about my convenience. It's not about, the financial support I get. It's not about anything. It is about, what can I do to just be here and be present, And I don't know. Do you know, sorry, I know I was going to talk too much. Do you know who, what's her name? Sister Helen Prejean is?
I do not. Okay. Josh is the more well-read one, so he may.
She is a Christian who got involved with death penalty advocacy in the United States. And there's a book she wrote called Dead Man Walking, and it was made into a movie. And it won a whole bunch of awards. Anyway, if you want to check it out,
I want to really just do a podcast with Jake and just pick his brain about stuff like this.
Anyway, she has one of the greatest lines that I've ever heard, because she was doing this talk and she was talking about just her advocacy. And obviously it's different than what we're talking about, but she has a line that she talks about when she was with some of these inmates who are on death row. They will be killed for the crime that they committed. And the people that she is a spiritual advisor for, they've repented, they've owned up to what they've done, but they're still going to be put to death.
Yeah.
And she walks with these people in just, I mean, you think about how scary that must be and everything. And she tells a story about she remembers the very first one that she ever experienced. And she said she was so scared. But she said the grace of God filled her. And the prisoner told her, don't come to the execution. Don't watch me die because I don't want you to see that. And she looked at him. This gets me emotional every time. She looked at him and she said, I was filled with the grace of God. And I said, I will be there because the last face that you get to see is a face of love.
Wow.
And I think about that quote a lot because when we are serving kids, whether that's in foster care, whether it's through adoption, or whether it's just your own family, when you have people looking at you, you want that to be, as Christians especially, we need to, it needs to be a face of love that they see. And we think about our foster son who's had 10 placements before the time they were 3 years old. And, we can't get into much detail, but some of those placements were not good.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of bad stuff that's happened.
Yep.
But to be able, the privilege to be able to provide that type of service and love and compassion where we know that every night when we get to put him to bed, at least we know he's seeing a face of love.
Yep.
And we're certainly not perfect, but at least we can say that this was another day that he got to see that.
Exactly.
And I would really push people into, don't put limits on yourself that you can't handle it emotionally or whether it's your time, your finances, whatever.
Yeah.
You can do it, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be scary at times and uncertain. I mean, even for us just to say, Megan, you're going to quit your job and stay home. I mean, that was a pretty big leap for us.
Big step.
And it's worked out for us, but it's just you have to just make some of those judgment calls and just be bold about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that could be a whole nother hour, is even there is a lot of things wrong in the system. And even that is the reality that some placements are not always a loving, good placement for people.
Yeah.
Even though foster families are vetted, right? And do go through a process. And so yes, it is scary that your heart would need to get vulnerable, and maybe it would hurt if they would have to go. The way I describe it is, even if you have an A+ home, reunification will happen, even if it's a D home or a D- home, as long as it's not an F and not failing.
Yeah.
The goal is reunification, and you have to be able to deal with that.
Yeah.
It might hurt, but that's the reality, and you have to get past that.
Yeah.
That was the best way I could grab onto it. But even with that, to know that, I just remember someone saying to me, and we're still definitely open to fostering. We've walked through adoption and just seeing what that would look like in our future. But I remember someone said, Jenaye, let's just say something happened to you and Josh. And for some reason, for 24 or 48 hours before you could get your kids safe with who you need them to be with, they had to be put in a home. Who do you want to make sure is stepping up so that 24 hours or where your kids would be, right? And so when I put it in that way of, I would want to make sure it's family like ours. And I would want to make sure, right? So I think we can want to leave it up to other people too. But as long as at least your heart is open and willing to do something, I think that's the biggest thing, no matter if it's be on the grandparent team or come alongside a foster family and support. I mean, that's huge. Or step out yourselves.
I mean, you think about any service at all, it's a sacrifice, no matter what it is, and motherhood in general. It's a sacrifice. Like you put yourself last.
Oh, totally.
And I mean, it's no different than with foster kids. So, and it's just worth it. The reward is just so much richer, I feel like. Yeah. I mean, just kids in general, not just foster kids.
Right.
But,
Exactly.
just pouring into them and
I feel like there's some moms doing that have teenagers that they're taking in their teenager friends and making sure their home is a safe home, and more teenagers that their parents don't care where they're at and they don't check in if they're safe and they come into this Christian home. And I've just heard that more moms that are like, I'm going to be the house that has the food. I'm going to be the house that it's like, if you want to stay, you can stay. You can sleep over, because
like the cool house to go to.
Yeah, right. Which usually it just probably is like a parent that cares.
Yeah.
Like I just, So it might look different for everyone, but like it matters. And I'm going to make sure we're going to talk with Robin, our assistant, and any resources like you guys mentioned. What is it? Nexus Path is who you went through.
They're one of the agencies that can license you. Or the state
so there's
can do
multiple
that too.
agencies. So we're gonna in the show notes put some links. So we have time to talk about that and maybe get even book recommendations or podcast recommendations, things like that. Or if someone wants to take a next step, we'll put that kind of in there in the link to TLI. So thank you guys so much for being vulnerable, even in how you share. Love you guys so much, and I love both your kids. So thank you guys for joining. I hope you were encouraged by this, maybe even really challenged, and I hope God spoke to some people through this. So can't wait to join you next time. Share, rate, subscribe, all those beautiful things that deal with the podcast. So thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.